All right, welcome back to another episode of the Untrained and Uneducated Pastor. I'm your host, Ronnie Qualls, pastor of First Baptist Bowlegs in Bowlegs, Oklahoma, America. And I just want to welcome everybody back. Man, I don't know who's subscribing out there, but I think we are up to a whopping 53. So Joe Rogan's,
big number.
He's in trouble. We are gaining like one every couple months, so we're working on it. Now, seriously, if you got any friends that you could benefit from this, share it with them. Because what this is about the pastor out there that's never had any formal education, formal training, but yet feels that God has called them into ministry, and it could be pastoral ministry, it could be evangelistic, anything. But a lot of times, I have a lot of friends that sometimes feel like they're kind of like second class, second citizen type thing. And I just want you to know that you're not. You're not alone. I'm that guy too. And it won't take too long to realize that this guy really is not educated or trained. But I want to read the verse that this comes out of, and it's probably one of my favorite verses. And it says, this is Acts 4:13. It says, "Now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated and untrained men, they marveled." And it says, "and they realized that they had been with Jesus." That right there, friends, is the important part. So, if you're a guy out there that knows how to use double negatives, and sometimes I even pull off a triple or a quadruple negative in a lot of things I say. Now, Justin is one of the guys that says I can't do it. But I proved to him over and over that it can be done. And I say this to the crowd that I'm preaching to: double negatives is nothing but emphasis, So they know what I'm talking about. And matter of fact, he does too. But this episode right here, I really want to do this one for a long time. I'm really excited. I have Justin Wright. He's one of the elders at Sovereign Grace Bible Church in Ada on here. And man, we have quite a past together, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're probably going to talk about a lot of things, but the thing of it is, this is just two pastors. Now, Justin is an educated guy. He'll tell a little bit more about himself, but he is educated, but he's never had any formal training, like going to seminary, anything like that. So in that aspect, he's just like a lot of the rest of us. So with that being said, Justin, why don't you just kind of tell people about yourself a little bit, all that good stuff, and we'll kind of get into some of these things.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on. It is a pleasure, and hopefully there's at least 50 people sees this.
Should be an honor to be on this podcast.
It is an honor.
All right.
It is an honor to get
very humbling, I'm sure.
No, so like he said, I'm a pastor at Sovereign Grace Bible Church. For my paid job, I teach school. I'm an ag teacher at Stratford High School. Been doing that for 23 years.
You're the record holder now.
Definitely the record holder at Stratford.
Right. That's what we're about here.
Setting records, breaking barriers. That's what we do. So I'm married to my beautiful wife, Misty. Have been for almost 23 years. Have 3 daughters, Grace, Faith, and Hannah. And let's see, I've been pastoring for about, 15 years?
Gosh, it probably
more like 13 years
13?
or so, about 13 years. Our churches, we had 2 churches, and they merged together about 8 years ago, I think it was, and...
no, brother, you ain't gonna believe how long ago.
How long ago was it?
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, that's about right.
Now,
Hannah was a baby. So.
Right. So just so everybody knows, prior to coming to Bowlegs, Justin and I, we were elders together in a church in Stratford, Oklahoma called Grace Bible Church. And then, I don't know, we did that for a couple years like that. And then we merged with Sovereign Grace Bible Church in Ada in 2015. That's how I remember that.
Wow. So it has been 10 years.
Yeah. And so for the next 5 years, we were elders together there. So that would be 7 years of ministry right there. And then the Lord led and called me over here to Bowlegs. I must have did something really bad. Now it's been a good trip, but and so yeah, I mean we were laboring together like that all that time. So
Right. Yeah.
so
So that's where I am now, still there, and went to school at Oklahoma State. That's where I met my wife. So my degree, he says I'm educated. Real educated people would laugh because my degree is in ag education. And anytime I was in college and they would ask my major, people laughed when I said that. So I'm not highly educated by any means, but I do have a degree, and I have a master's degree in education as well. But no formal training when it comes to ministry or even Bible classes. It's all been kind of more of a hard knocks. We're the school of hard knocks. We've learned a lot of lessons. Did prison ministry with Ronnie for a long time before we were elders, and then a little bit afterwards.
let's just do this. Let's back up a little bit and just tell everybody from your point of view, how we met, when we met and all that.
Yeah, so I was 22 years old when I got out of college, and I met Ronnie at a little church called Church of the Firstborn. And if you've watched this, you've probably heard about it. I don't know.
I talked a little bit about it.
But that's how I was raised, and had only went to one church my entire life in Chandler. And when I moved to Stratford, it was too far to go there, so I started going to this one in Stratford, or place called Prairie View, big time metropolis.
It's just a name.
Nothing there but a church. And anyway, so that's where I met Ronnie, and not too long after that, he was leaving that church for some doctrinal issues, and we probably won't go into all of that. We don't have the time, but long story short, when he left, I went with him, and we started doing a lot of Bible studies in the homes and trying to just go through Scripture and figure out a little more about what was in there. I mean, when that happened, I realized I didn't know near as much as I thought I did about the Bible. And a matter of fact, I'll just tell it. So I realized when I left that meeting, when Ronnie resigned as elder there,
That was a good meeting.
I realized we could tell lots of stories, but
we're going to tell some of them.
I had never read through a complete book of the Bible. I had just read bits and pieces like a lot of people do. And if you're one of those people, I encourage you to pick a book and just start in chapter 1 and read all the way through. So I was thinking, I'm going to read through a book. And I'm just a kid, 22 years old. I may have been 23 by that time, but I'm figuring things out. And I thought, well, I'm not going to pick the shortest book. That would be lame. So I'm going to pick Galatians. It was completely random, I thought. But God, in His sovereignty, which I didn't know what that was at the time, but in His providence, He had a plan. And by the time I read through Galatians, I realized I've been looking at this all wrong. I saw grace in there for the first time, and I think that's probably when I truly got born again. About that time.
I would say that was definitely the providential hand of God that you read Galatians, because it really dealt with everything that we were probably coming out of.
Yeah.
But now wait a second. You've gone pretty fast. I want to tell everybody about when we met and you brought. I don't think you and Misty were married. That first time we invited you guys over.
No, at that time, the first time we came to your house, we were married.
Okay, so y'all were married, and this is the way this goes down. So they're coming over. Now you got to realize something. We don't really know each other that well.
No, barely.
So where I was at, like doctrinally, I was really out of that church mentally. I just wasn't physically. I was still an elder in the church. It's a long story, folks. We'll have to tell it another time. But I kind of thought Justin was probably on the same page as me, and that's just There's different kind of groups of churches in the firstborn circle, so I thought his was probably a little bit more, thinking along the lines of where I was at. Now, with that being said, here's the way it went down with him coming over. His wife Misty says, "Listen, whatever you do not leave me here. Like go somewhere with this guy or something." And he's like, "Oh, I definitely won't do that." Y'all walk through the door.
The first thing she said, "You're not gonna like leave and go to
Yeah.
town, are you?" Because she didn't know him at all, and
Yeah, she didn't know us at all.
and I barely knew him. And so we walk in the door, and Ronnie goes, "Now, hey, you want to run to the store with me?" I was like, "Sure."
First thing, I mean, the only thing she asked him not to do, and yeah, so, but
I don't
it all worked
recommend
out
that.
good.
I don't recommend that for young married men. Don't do that. But in Providence, again, we had a great talk and got me to thinking about new things. And this was before the meeting where he resigned.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a lot of talks before that meeting. Well, few, not a whole lot, because it wasn't very long after that
Yeah,
that everything changed. And the other thing is, my wife, she was raised Baptist. And so she was not being accepted into that church. You had to be baptized into that church to be accepted there. And
yeah,
so we were having some problems early in our marriage due to that stuff. And so anyway, that kind of set the ball into motion. And we, after we left there, those Bible studies, and a brother named C.A. Freeman came down, and he taught us a lot.
Oh yeah, I remember that first night they came down. I remember when we left. I mean, okay, so the meeting he's talking about, it's a meeting where I had to call it out on myself basically. And what I did was like I went up to the church and all the men were invited. And that was what was weird because I was an elder in that church. My co-elder had called Justin and told him we're having this meeting. He didn't tell him anything about it. He was totally clueless on what this thing is about. But as soon as I walked up to the pulpit, he knew he was kind of serious. And so I just said two things. I said, I don't think the Church of the Firstborn is the only church going to heaven, because we were kind of that group that thought so. And I said, the other thing is I believe we're saved by grace and not of works at all. And so anyway, that's kind of where that started. Where was I going with that though? I was saying that for some reason. Gosh, dog.
I don't know, but kind of on that point about grace, and this would have been the thing that Ronnie. So the two different types of Church of the Firstborn. I was raised in one that would have been considered more liberal, not anywhere near liberal like we use the term, but it was definitely less staunch or less hardline than the one that Ronnie was in, and so.
And trust me, there was some that was way more hard and staunch than what I would.
Right. There's not a lot of consistency from place to place, but there's a few doctrines that are consistent throughout.
Yeah.
And that's what he didn't know, because we weren't really accepted. The church I grew up in wasn't really accepted by the other Church of the Firstborns.
Right.
So it's confusing, but so when he said in that meeting, I believe we're saved by grace, I would have said the same thing. And matter of fact, I did in that meeting. I said, "Hey, we all agree we're saved by grace, right?" And I remember him going, he was standing there and he goes, "Man, this guy is new." And I was like, "What?" Now, here's the deal. And looking at it now, and this is the first time I've actually realized this, my definition of grace wasn't what it is now. And I think what I would say now is we're saved by grace alone. And at that time, I would have said we're saved by grace, but, which a lot of people say that. There's a lot of people in all denominations that will say we're saved by grace, but there's several things that come after that you have to do. So it's not grace alone.
Yeah.
And that's where I was. Now, that church where he was standing and speaking, it was more like, no, you're saved by works. And they actually said that night. Yeah. And that's what floored me. I was like, wait a minute. And then when I read the book of Galatians, that's the first time I think I realized it's grace alone. And I wouldn't even have known to say that. I didn't know about the solas. I didn't know about the Reformation. I didn't know all those
yeah, we didn't know
things.
any of that stuff.
But I was just like, I had a note in the margin of my old King James Bible at the end of Galatians. It said it's all about grace, and I had it underlined with exclamation points. That's
Yeah.
what I got out of that book. And then my daughter was born shortly after that, and of course that's why her name
Is that really? I didn't know
that is
that.
absolutely why her name is
I did
Grace.
not know that until right now, man. If you told me that, I don't remember it. Oh, I know why I was saying that about that meeting. Because the morning after that meeting, I think I called you,
did,
and I said, "Are you okay?" Because you got to realize he did not know this was coming. And when he asked about, "Don't y'all think we're all saved by grace?" It was almost like an attack. I mean,
I definitely got bombarded
he was
with
young,
questions that I couldn't answer.
Yeah, and
that
I was like,
the deal.
oh,
I
boy.
was like, man, I should be able to answer those questions. I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
a Christian. I'm supposed to know these, and I didn't know the answers. And that's what got me to reading.
Yeah,
the
so
first time.
that's when you said C.A. Freeman. I remember. You said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm just going to try to have some Bible studies." And he's like, "Man, that sounds good." Well, here's what I realized real quick. I knew how to preach, but I did not know how to teach like just a Bible study. I remember I had all these notes, man. It was great. And I think I flamed through those in about 5 minutes. And I was just standing there like shocked, like I just went through the whole thing like a buzzsaw. And CA kind of stepped in and he says, "Hey," and he really did. It was a big help, there in the beginning. And because even though we had, we're coming out and all that stuff of the church, man, I mean, looking back, we didn't really know a whole lot. We knew what was probably not right, but we didn't know.
I didn't even know that. I didn't have any idea what was right and what was wrong. I knew the things that I was taught, and a lot of them, looking back on it, were not wrong. I mean, there was a lot of good things still, but the general gospel and salvation, I just didn't understand it. And when I started reading completely, and then with CA really helped us break down some of those books and the gospel and a lot of that. He helped me kind of learn how to study a little bit, and so it was very helpful in that time.
Right.
And so
yeah, so at that point we were doing that for a while, and then well, I mean, we just wound up in a lot of different journeys, but
let me tell you something. This guy has probably put me in. I've been in some awkward situations in my life. Most of them was because of him.
At least in your adulthood.
Yeah, a lot of, especially when it comes to church situations, Christianity, because when we come out of there, basically we thought that was the only way. We don't think that anymore now. So everything's okay. Hey, if something's going on, we're going. And he would call me, "Hey, this is going on, we're going." And we'd go, and there's some crazy stuff out there if you guys don't know. People falling down and feathers falling from the sky.
Oh, man, I forgot about
trains
them
going to heaven. And
yeah, that was a good night, man. We went to this, it was like a homeless shelter type thing, and we were helping them with a meal or something, some people, and we ended up staying for their little church service that night. And when the singing was pretty much like open mic, and I think I would have been one of the better singers that night, to be honest. But
it was pretty.
But at one point, they started doing this song, and it was the train going to heaven. What's that little dance? What is that where everybody grabs a hold of each other?
The Congo.
Congo. It was kind of like that.
Conga,
but it was the train going to heaven, and each lap, more and more people would join, and finally it was just us four sitting there. And I remember thinking, "Lord, if it goes one more lap, I'm going to have to get on board," And I remember once they looked at us, they said, "Don't y'all want to go to heaven? Don't y'all want on the train going to heaven?"
Yeah.
And it was like, it's so
and
awkward.
It wasn't like it was a big place. It was small, and the train had run out. I mean...
Yeah. I mean, what was it, 15 people maybe,
No, there was probably more than that. There was quite a few homeless people.
Yeah.
That
was over here in Holdenville.
It was, yeah.
And the place that it is, there's a pastor now that he sells like stuff for your home, like discounted price, like roofing and windows and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it's Pastor Al Gomez, and that's the place it was in.
It was an old school, I think,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah, and yeah. So that crazy, some funny stuff like that. We one time, now he dogs me about this pretty good. I'd heard about this guy from South Africa a little bit, and well, here's what it was. There's a group there's a like sermon place you can listen to called Sermon Index, kind of like Sermon Audio, and the guy that runs it, I think his name is Greg Gordon, and I know he used to do these conferences, and he'd have a lot of speakers. Well, I noticed that all this speaker lineup, every name was about the same except when it was done in America, Paul Washer was on there. But when it was done over in Europe somewhere, Paul Washer probably couldn't make it or something. And this guy named Keith Daniels from South Africa. So I find out this guy's preaching in Oklahoma City at this church. And I tell Justin, I said, hey, man, we ought to go to this. This guy, he's like the Paul Washer of South Africa.
That's how he said it.
Hey,
Paul Washer of South Africa is preaching in Oklahoma City.
Let me just give you all a heads up. He was not. Okay. So we go to this church, and we find out real quick we are definitely the oddballs. I mean, this was a King James only. I mean, women head coverings, dresses. I mean, it was
a Baptist church, but it was
a Baptist church.
Very much kind of an old style.
So the pastor stands up before it started, if I remember right, and he announces everybody. He says, "Now, Brother Keith can preach in the face of a roaring lion." Something like that.
No. That's what the pastor said later. He just announced that, hey, we would really appreciate, we have a room for the babies. If you have a baby that's crying, we have a room. Please take your children out there. It's distracting. He has a hard time preaching with distractions. And then he started preaching. And I'll just say this: his preaching was a little different from the start. But this happened really early. We didn't know yet what we were getting.
Yeah, we didn't know.
We're still kind of like on the edge of our seat, waiting on this guy.
Yeah, I just remember he seemed almost theatrical, like he's doing a one.
Now he was memorized. He was preaching out of Revelation, and he had it memorized. Okay. Whatever he was saying, because I'm reading along, but he wasn't reading it.
But he was kind of like he was just like, real slow, just bringing it out in his hands like this. And in the meantime, this family had come in, like sat on the row right in front of us, young couple, and she had a little baby, young husband, young wife. And I swear that baby just squeaked a little bit.
It didn't
I mean, it wasn't like nothing.
Nothing like we've preached in front of him,
And this guy, and all of a sudden this guy in this theatrical deal, he just kind of freezes. And man, you're just kind of like, wow, we're all kind of like, what's, something big's fixing to happen. And it did. Dude looks at everybody and he just stares this woman down.
You need to do your impersonation.
Oh, I will. He goes, "Madam, there's a baby room." And we're kind of like, what's that mean? We're still thinking it's a sermon,
It's so crazy.
And all of a sudden we realize he has singled this girl out. I mean, this girl's in her early 20s. And you can tell she's gathering stuff up, trying to take the baby out. Yeah, she didn't hear the message in the beginning. And then he just stands up and just stares at her. And as she's trying to leave, and he says, if you don't leave, my night is over, finished, or something.
Yeah, and that's when he said, I can preach in front of a roaring lion.
Oh, yeah.
Not a baby.
Yeah. And I was thinking, I'm sitting there thinking, well, I want to take this dude to the zoo here in a little bit and chunk him over the fence at the lion deal. Let's get it on, brother. Yeah, let's just say I was not impressed with that fellow at all. I know a lot of people think a lot of him, but he needs to apologize to that girl, in all my opinion.
Well, then it was really strange from that point on, which that was enough of a turnoff that I wasn't really engaged. But he preached for like 2 hours.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And his message, the weird thing about it was, he's kicking out the babies, and his message was all about
your kids,
wayward children.
Yeah.
And nothing
Yeah.
lined up. It was extremely odd. But
Now-
we found out later, we didn't know who Gothard was at that time, but that church had been heavily influenced by Bill Gothard and
Very much.
some of that stuff. There's some issues there. You know?
Yeah, I think they could tell we were not Gothardites.
No, I'm pretty sure.
So yeah, let's just say that we come to the conclusion that he was not the South African Paul Washer.
No.
That was our assessment of the evening. So afterwards, we went and ate somewhere and had a good time as normal. But
somebody played the violin that night, and actually they wound up coming to our church later.
Really,
that was one of the I'm drawing a blank here. Burnett's.
They were there that night.
I think so.
Oh,
I think
wow.
that was one of the Burnett's that played the violin or
Probably
that night. But
yeah,
it was a long time before they came.
And I mean, everybody has a bad night. Maybe the fella had a bad night. I don't know, but it's about all I can say about that.
Yeah.
So
that was another one of those adventures. That was after we had at least developed some sort of solid doctrine, though.
Now we need to tell him what our plan was too. That if he ever came back, we were going to take little wind-up babies and wind them up and just let them start crawling all over the floor and just wham.
I think he needed it for sanctification. I think
do
it would have
too.
been good for him. I don't know.
Maybe our thoughts were not on the best intentions, but anyway, I don't know. We've had a lot of crazy times like that for sure, man.
Yeah, the road from where we met to here has been it's been really, really good and never lacked excitement.
No.
I mean, to the prison, some of the times in the prison, we saw some crazy stuff in there too.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of different, and we did different kind of ministry in there. When we started, we were just meeting, like they would have this program and we would just sit at tables with guys who are, claiming Christians, and we would just visit with them. Kind of a discipleship time. But the weird thing is that program would have, it was all religion. So there would be a Jewish table, a Muslim table. There was like a Native American table.
Yeah.
And once in a while, we got to kind of go over there and visit with those guys. And
Hey, do you remember the guy? He was just one guy, but I went to his table and he says, "I'm a pagan." And I laughed. I thought he was saying like, "I'm a heathen." And when I laughed, he's like, "No, I'm serious."
you actually learned that there is a religion called paganism.
Yeah.
We didn't know.
I mean,
that.
I just thought, when it referred to the pagans, it was just like the heathens or something. But no, it's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, man." So,
yeah.
But
it didn't take long to figure out too. We knew more about Islam than the Muslims.
Oh,
the
my
Muslims
goodness.
at that. We think they were just Muslims because during Ramadan they got better food.
Yeah, I think some of
A
them
lot of them were not actual practicing Muslims.
I think it was the Jewish group that I think some of these people, I think they did it because on a certain time of the year they get wine, like they let them have real wine.
Yeah, that's popular in prison, I'm sure.
Yeah, but even in that, I mean, I remember one night I was preaching. I think I was preaching on how we're saved by grace and not of works. We had a guy in there named Gerald, and he was there from the very beginning. Tell him what he said to you after the meeting.
He was a good guy.
Strong emphasis
really liked
on
him. He always did sound for us.
Yeah.
Would help us set up speakers, but yeah. So Ronnie had made a very strong point that you can't lose your salvation.
I sure thought I did.
In this deal, and so after the meeting, I'm talking to Gerald, and he's like, "Man, that's a good message. That was really good." I said, "Yeah, it's pretty amazing that people read that." I don't remember what scripture you were in, but I said people read that and then they still think they can lose their salvation. And he said, "Well, I don't believe that garbage." I was like, "So you believe you can lose your salvation?" "Well, yeah." But there was a disconnect there, and that was something we realized at the prison a lot. There was lots of amens. It was a very lively crowd.
Yeah.
You'd get a lot of feedback, people amening and everything, and they may not be really hearing what you're saying.
No.
Exactly.
No,
But
I can tell you this. If you do prison ministry, there's going to be a lot of guys lining up when you're through, and they're going to be saying, "Man, that was awesome." Now, you could preach one thing. Somebody could come in the next night and preach, completely opposite of you.
And
And
they
the
like
same
both.
guys are going to say the same thing. So
Yeah.
now, with that being said, man, we did run across guys that were very, very well read, studied. I mean,
With
sometimes
good theology. There was
sometimes well read and studied, but not with good theology. But nonetheless, I mean, we had to learn how to be in the middle of preaching, and somebody does this number, and you're kind of like, what? You know, I mean, like, I got a question, and I'm like, man, I wasn't used to that at all. And yeah, I remember one night I was in there preaching, and I'd gotten used to it, and there was a guy in the back, and he's back there doing this, you know. And I kept saying, yeah. I said, what do you got? And and finally I said, brother, do you have a question? He was like, oh, no, man. He would just raise his hand like praise God, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking he's trying to ask a question, but we had some, we had one, okay, this was a men's prison we're preaching at. And there was a fella in there that, let's just say he was a little different. He would fix himself up look like a woman, so much so that we would, okay, this ain't good on our part, but we'd say, man, was that chick there? And and then we'd go, I mean, you had to keep telling yourself this was a guy.
He looked like a woman.
But I remember, I think he came in one time, and now you got to realize this: when we go into prison, this guy would come there because they would use religious services as like date night, like going to the movies or something.
Well, and you kind of learn the culture. So they're all on different blocks, like cell blocks, and that there's not very many times you can see the people from a different cell block, but religious services was one of them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just for date night. Some guys would just come, you know, just to hang out, get out of their cell, get out of the norm, and which was all. I mean, the way we looked at it was, hey, that's a blessing. Whatever reason they're there, they're hearing the truth, they're hearing the word of God preached, and God will use that, you know. And so we have no idea. We didn't get a lot of follow up from very much, and you know, guys would get shipped out and they would go to different places, they'd get released, all kinds of different things. But we just trust that God was working through all that time.
I just remember I think he came one time, and then it was like a month or so later, and he showed back up. He walked up to me and he goes, I remember you. And I said, and I remember you.
Yeah.
He goes, you gave a very good speech.
Which, you know, how much, we haven't been in there in a long time. I bet you see a whole lot more of that now. Since 2020, when that stuff all really started going crazy with the trans, I bet you see a lot more of that in prison now than what we did.
Yeah, you know, we saw some really good things in there. Like you're saying, I mean, we saw, like in our service, I remember one night the guys told me that they said, man, you guys are the only ones that do this. And it was like, I don't know if you were there that night, but I said, what do you mean? They said, you guys are the only ones that come in and actually preach the Bible. Now you got to realize, I think back then we heard there was like 42 different volunteers that would come in. Now I don't know if that was 42 times a month or if there was 42 different ones, but it was a number of people that were volunteers there. And I said, what do you mean we're the only ones that preach the Bible? And I said, what do they do? And he said, well, they come in, they might read something, and then they just tell a bunch of stories. And I was like, wow. So the crazy thing is we come in, we're Baptist type people, you know? And most of the guys on the inside were Pentecostal, kind of on that flavor of things. Too charismatic, you know. I mean, when I say charismatic, I mean kind of getting over way out there. And here we are, but yet they loved coming to our service because it challenged them. It made them read. It made them study. And you know, we had a guy in there named Barry that, by his own admission, he said, I was just a nominal Christian. And he said, man, and I was preaching on the sovereignty of God one night. I mean, I preached through several things. And he said, man, when you started preaching on that, he said, it really changed everything for me. And that guy, I mean, I'm telling you, he got so serious about his serving the Lord. And he started ordering stuff from, Chapel Library or something. And it's one of those that if you're an inmate, they will send you the material free.
Yeah.
And he was getting stuff from oh my goodness, I can't even think of their names now. They're solid people. Maybe it'll come to me later, but I mean, really solid, people that, Christians who have passed on, but their literature's still out there. And he was just growing in leaps and bounds. Man.
Yeah, he was. And he was a blessing to us, too. Because he was able to kind of be he was witnessing and, discipling guys inside there. And it's a challenging ministry, which I don't know of any ministry that's not challenging.
It's challenging, and I'll tell you this: if somebody, like anybody out there, if you feel like you've been called to preach, and when I say things are good training ground, I don't mean that like it's not real, it's not that, but when you go preach in a prison, like I said, there's people that really are studied up. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're going to be where you're at, and other times they're going to be from a different angle and have different views on this. And man, them hands will go up and they'll start asking questions. That's where we learn to answer. I know that for me personally, questions on the spur of the moment on the spot don't bother me a bit. And I don't think they bother you.
No, I actually like.
I do too. I kind of thrive on it. And I really think I learned a lot of that doing prison ministry, because you're getting questions right there. And I mean, you've got to be able to answer them. Now, that ain't saying we always had the answers, but
No, and that's one of the things I think why questions don't bother me is I'm not afraid to say I don't know.
Right.
Because it does happen. But a lot of times people learn the best. If they have a question, that means they're actually interested in what you're going to say. If when you're just talking, preaching, whatever, they may not be. If they ask a question, right, they're going to listen. And so that's a good thing. But yeah, like you're saying, if there's anybody out there that feels like they're called to preach, go find a prison and get into it. It takes some work to get.
You got to get
a badge, and you have to go to a class to do that. But if you want to preach, you'll go through those things, and go in there and preach, and you will learn.
And I would say this: when you go to a prison and you're doing services, you're going to meet all these guys, and what's going to kind of mess you up, these guys are going to be nice guys. Mm-hmm. Other than the fact they're in prison, they could be anybody out on the street. Now here's where you're going to have a problem. You're going to go like, man, he's a really good guy. I'm going to just caution you. You may not want to go do the offender lockup and check him out.
No,
because you're talking to this nice guy.
Most of them aren't good guys,
and all of a sudden you're like, he did what? And you just have to remember that God's grace is bigger than any sin out there besides the sin of unbelief. Unbelief, there's no forgiveness for. But yeah. I mean, if you repent, you know what I'm saying. If you die in unbelief, but the thing is, not only that, but they're going to come to you. And they're going to do things like this. They want to know what you, like, hey, what kind of work do you do? And what they're doing is the reason they're called con men for a reason. Okay. Now, I'm not saying all of them are like this, but there's a majority. Even the inmates themselves would tell us and warn us these things. Mm-hmm. What they're doing, they're trying to figure out what you can do for them. Like, do you make good money and all this? And then there's a time like you have to keep the boundaries where you need to keep them.
Yeah.
And so like when
that's the reason you go to that class and you get that badge,
but even going to the class, you still have to learn it. You have to experience it.
You learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about people for sure.
Yeah.
Because you realize, okay, these guys are doing this. They're in prison. You should have your guard up, and they still fool you. And then you get in the real world, and the Bible says there's none good, no, not one, and it's obviously accurate when it says that. People will come across really nice and good, and they may be manipulating you. Of course, and we also I think we really saw the power of God's saving grace, where some of those people, you look it up, and you can even tell a difference in their picture, their mugshot. This is hard, just rough-looking guy, and this guy that we know is this soft, gentle man, and I think it was the Holy Spirit that had converted him, and so we saw a lot of that. but we also saw a lot of faking, and took us a while, or took me a while to figure out,
It took me a while too. I mean,
and just they won't allow you to work with them, helping them bring anything from outside or inside or any of that stuff. So, but it's a
yeah, yeah, because we've actually had some of the inmates get released, and like a guy that I would do contract work for, he would put these guys to work, and some of those guys, they would go work with me, sometimes weeks at a time, and some of them proved out to be genuine, and others sadly proved out they were not genuine.
Yeah. And wound up back in prison.
Yeah, wound up back in prison, and so you have those things, and I mean, listen, it's no different than church. I mean, you've got people that come, you feel like they're truly saved, and then later on they prove that they're probably not, and you got some that come, and man, they're just they just growing like gangbusters, in the Lord. So yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of times like that. I tell you though, some of my favorite times together. I mean, we've traveled a lot, but I used to really. I mean, I didn't think about it at the time, but looking back on it, I always looked forward to just the driving over there and the driving back.
Yeah, that's probably where the discipleship. We didn't really know that's what we were doing. Ronnie he's older than me, and
we look the same age, I know.
Pretty close. It was always fun whenever we were spending a lot of time together back then. When people thought I was his son, that was always always a great day.
I mean, I'm thinking, is there anything that? But your dad's about as short as I am. I mean, he ain't as big as me.
Yeah. So I mean, I mean, probably just because we were together a lot. But
yeah.
But no, it was good. He had a lot more biblical knowledge than I did, and so he discipled me in that time. And that's one of those things I think about discipleship a lot. We have a lot of people that want to have this official meeting. We're going to meet once a week, and that's all good. But I think the best discipleship happens when it's just natural.
Yeah.
We were friends. We might talk about, football or whatever's going on, politics, and then it would almost always wind up on some sort of scripture.
Yeah.
And what do we believe on this, and how do we apply this in football or school or whatever in the workplace? And it was just very natural and organic, and didn't probably realize it at the time. We just enjoyed hanging out.
And I'll say this: while I do believe there needs to be discipleship going on, and that is really. I think it's the Jesus way, really.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, it's just kind of as you're going, as you're just living life, and I mean, because we had camaraderie. I mean, man, our stop, without fail, we were going to stop at Asher and get the best chicken in the world over there.
If you are anywhere near Central Oklahoma, and they are not one of the sponsors of this podcast, although they should be, as much as I've advertised for them.
Exactly.
It is the best chicken in the world at the Circle B gas station out of the hot box.
Now,
just telling you.
I'm going to say it may not be the cleanest looking place, but the guy that gets your chicken wears those plastic gloves.
From a clean? No.
Probably not. Not the ones I've seen. But I don't know what they put in there, and I'm afraid to ask. It might be illegal. If we get drug tested, it could be bad.
It is addictive.
But it's some good stuff. And but we always loved it. And I felt bad because I knew when we walked in that prison, they could probably smell it on us.
Oh, if you walked in the place
for
2 seconds, you smelled like a hot box. But
yeah. So
those were definitely good times. And and there was other times when other guys went with us. It wasn't always just the two of us. We had sometimes we had carload, and then sometimes we had, just a couple of us. But I think what was a big learning experience was I would listen to the sermon. Most of the time we were going, he was preaching. I was not preaching very much.
You wasn't really preaching probably
very
in the early
little,
days.
Very little. I preached in there a few times, but mostly I was there with you, and then we'd have all the things, whatever would happen while we're in there, whatever just quite crazy discussion would come up because they had some crazy ideas, And then we'd get to talk about that on the way home. And, well, how do you answer this? And, how do we flesh this out? And there was sometimes it was very challenging to us. And, man, we're going to have to go home and study
Yeah.
this and figure out where we stand. And through all of that time is when we kind of solidified, or at least I did, where my theology really was. And a lot of it was due to that prison ministry and the time that we were spending driving up and down the road.
Now I'm going to say something. This podcast is called The Uneducated and Untrained Pastor. If you're King James, it's the ignorant and unlearned. So, but here's the thing. Now, and I'm just going to give a contrast here. What we're talking about, and if you're kind of getting the understanding, the idea, God was teaching us in all of these things. I mean, yeah, we were somewhat clueless, but we were in prayer, we were in the Word, we were in conversation. These things were on our minds, and the Lord taught us.
Oh, without a doubt.
And the thing is, if you think about where we came from and all the different things that we went through, it wasn't like a cookie cutter type thing. Whereas this is the thing I fear for a lot of people coming out of seminary. When they come out, it's like they have somewhat forgot how to think for themselves. Now I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying that, like, if depending on what seminary you come out of, if you know much about them, you can you don't even got to ask them. You can tell which ones they're from just by the language they use and what they believe and all this. And so I don't think I'd have done good in seminary anyway, because I'm just I think way too much for myself as it is.
I think a lot of people that try to go to seminary when they're older struggle with it because of that. They like, and the whole system, we've talked about this before, the whole system of seminary is really not good. And here's why. There's several reasons, but one is about the only time you can afford to do that is when you're young. You don't have a family to support. The only time you have really the time, now it's getting a lot better now because of online. You can do a lot of stuff online. You can do it a little slower. But the way it used to be when you had to go, the only way you could do that was if you were young and didn't have a family to support. Well, the reality is, how old are you really when you find out you're called to be a pastor? I was probably 36, 37, something like that.
And that's going to vary, but we know this. Just because a guy goes to seminary does not mean that God's called him.
No, and just because, and the other thing is, I had a guy that graduated seminary tell me this. He said, look, seminary is just a stack of books. I mean, you're learning, we can learn just about anything taught in a seminary by reading books. What you can't learn is how to deal with people. That's one of those things that you can't teach. It's got to be through experience. And so that's why we view it in our church that a lot better, the online deal is a lot better. If you want to go to seminary, do it online. Stay here under the authority of the church and serve your church and serve people, and so that you can really learn what ministry is all about.
Yeah, you just said that about serve people. You have to be around people. And I'm going to say this. I mean, okay, when you're around unbelievers, you're going to get whatever, okay? But even if you only have communication with people that think just like you, you're going to start getting to where you've just funneled it down, where you're not really having to force yourself to think any longer. And so it's good to have discussions with people, and when I say that, I don't mean like have an argument, trying to, I'm not on Facebook no more, but when I was, I mean, my goodness, especially like in Reformed type circles, man, guys are constantly fighting over infant baptism, believers baptism. I mean, 1689 Westminster, all these different things.
What songs you sing?
Yeah, can we sing just songs that are written today, or has it got to be Psalms only? Here's the thing crazy to me about the Psalms only group. Do you know most of the time they do it a cappella? When the word means to pluck a stringed instrument. I mean, I'm like, okay, I ain't real bright, fellas, but I'm thinking you need at least a guitar or something going there. But, it's just, you get into all that stuff, and then you see somebody that may not believe just exactly like you. I mean, I'm talking about on secondary issues, but on, the main things, they believe the same thing for the most part. And then you see, it's just like they're just talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
It's just like I think the sermon you preached here in our first conference, Jesus Christ and Him crucified,
Yeah.
and that's the part where we want to really remain,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, good day. I mean, what I believed 25 years ago, it was just bad. I mean, I probably had some things right, but
Right. Well, and so much of that, kind of going back to the ministry, what are you going to tell somebody when you're at their bedside and they're dying?
yeah,
What are you going to tell the family of that guy? Or what are you going to tell somebody that's just lost a loved one? And you get into those little arguments, and I'm not saying they're not important. It's important how we do church. It's important how all those things. But a lot of that stuff takes a real quick back seat when people are dealing with real problems. Even prisoners. This guy's, he's in here and he's facing life in prison, and his mom just died, and he can't even go to her funeral. You got to minister to those people, and you got to help. You got to have a lot of compassion, and that's not. You can't learn that in a seminary. You can't learn that in a book unless it's the Bible. The Bible's the only book that's going to teach you, and it's because of the power of the Holy Spirit that will really teach you how to serve those people.
right. Now, one thing that I would say that is probably good about seminary is that you're in there with a professor that should really know his stuff, and I think for the most part they do. I mean, I've never been. I just know who some of them are at times, and it's good that you can get in there and and I guess there's these discussions that take place and stuff like that. But at the same time, I was going to say this a while ago. There is a lot of emphasis put on discipleship anymore, and I think we may have gone just a little too far with it, because the greatest discipleship that really goes on is it's you can learn from one another, you can just do those things, but truly the Holy Spirit is the one that's the teacher.
Oh, sure.
And I don't want to disciple anybody. I know Paul said, be as I am as I try to follow Christ, but what I mean is this: I want to disciple people to use their God-given talents and abilities and gifts and callings and all those things to pursue Christ. Trust me, we don't need another one of me. We do not, one is probably more than enough. And so, there's a fine line there. Because I can tell you this. The first time that I remember you teaching, we were in a home church, and things were getting a little wacky on some things. And there was a guy that visited our church that had come out of the worldwide Church of God, the Armstrongism stuff. He'd come out of that. I mean, you talk about exclusive. I mean, they were as exclusive as any church could be. Very, very legalistic. So this guy swings way over here. Now the guy's a universalist. I mean, he just sees everybody as the children of God. I mean, I remember asking him, well, what do you think hell is? I mean, and he says, well, I hadn't thought about hell in a long time, because I believe hell is for God's children, and this is everybody. It's right now not realizing that God loves them, and this was hell. To not be a professing believer, but God was still going to save him. Well, so one of the guys in our church, he says, "Man, you need to be our Sunday school teacher." I was like, "Okay, that is not happening." And we had another guy he wouldn't even say he's a teacher; he was a facilitator. Yeah. And I just told Justin, I said, "Listen up, next Sunday you're teaching." And that's the way it started. And
no direction.
Yeah, no
what
direction.
What am I going to teach? I don't know. You figure it out.
Well, he started in a good place. He started in the very first of the book. He started in Genesis 1:1. And I remember having the thought hit me. I thought, oh no, what if he's terrible? This is going to be awkward. But here's what happened. The one thing that I've always really admired about you, and I tell people this all the time, I say, Justin is the best at staying within. It's like staying in your own lane. and what staying within yourself. And what I mean by that is you never tried to preach beyond what you knew. And you were one of the best I've ever seen at just going verse by verse, explaining this verse and then this verse. I mean, I'll be honest, I see it, I see you do it, and I think that seems pretty simple, but I don't seem to be able to do that. I mean, we just preach in a different way. And now I'll say this too. I've listened to some of your sermons, since I've been over here, at times, and I'm like, man, he's really gotten good. I think somebody might be trying to sneak in on us or something. They're going to find out I got my keys in the lock there. Huh. Well, I don't know. We may have to fix that. But anyway, we're going to move on till they beat on my window or something. But I've seen you grow so much in it. But that was really when it started for you. And it's kind of like our Sunday school hour.
Yeah, that was the first time I had ever taught anything biblical, was that next week.
Yeah, because you are a school teacher.
Yeah, I mean, so teaching it didn't scare me. What to teach was the issue. And at that, but there early on, before we had probably even got to that home church, I had just developed a love for creation science and the book of Genesis. And so there was a guy named, you guys may have heard of him, named Kent Hovind, and a friend of yours from Montana gave us some videos, and man, that guy was he was a huge blessing. Coming out of college in an agriculture science, so I was a natural sciences major. I didn't have a lot of evolution teaching, but I had a lot of questions because it was there all through.
Oh, yeah.
And man, this guy answered all those, and it was like, wow. And so it gave me a big love for that. And so that was kind of what I diverted to start out with, was the book of Genesis. And man, just learned a lot. You learn more by teaching than listening. If you don't know, if you really want to find out if you know something, teach it. And you'll find out you don't know near as much as you think. And his wife, I don't know. Have you had Randy on here?
No, but I keep telling her she's going to do it.
Yeah, she's going to.
She's trying to crawdad on me, but I said, no, you're going to do it.
She would ask the hardest questions. It'd be a small little group we were teaching in, and her hand would go up, and you'd be like, "Oh no!" And like I said earlier, I love answering questions. I use questioning to teach, but when her hand went up, I was usually scared because there was a 90% chance I was not going to have an answer, because it would be a really hard question.
She definitely thinks about things. I used to tell her, I was like, woman, can't you just ask me that at home? You don't got to embarrass me in public,
Yeah, there was a lot of times I would be like, I'm going to have to look into that, and I would come the next week and with the answer. And so
I used to tell people, I said, if she raises her hand, just act like you don't see it. We'd have a church of 15 or 20. Just act like you don't see her back there. She's lost in the crowd.
Yeah.
But yeah, she... Yeah, she don't do that near as much as she used to. I don't know what's going on. Oh, is that what it is? Yeah. You got them all answered?
We have a lady now in our church, and she's very, very similar, extremely talented, and she's a deep thinker. And when her hand goes up, I'm usually like, this is not going to be simple. So,
but that's good,
and
though.
It's a blessing. It challenges us, and there's other people that learn a lot from that. So
yeah, that's for sure, man. So okay, let me ask you this. I mean, how are things? Just tell me about your time in the ministry. I mean, from the time it started, and because there's probably some things that I was there for a lot of it. But there's probably a lot of things I don't know. I mean, just the growth that you've had in that and learning things. I mean,
yeah. So I wasn't entirely like, I didn't just like have this calling moment like, oh, I'm called to the ministry and start pursuing that. It was more of, actually, we were in a very small home church, and we've always believed in a plurality of elders, and so when we went to that home it wasn't a home church, small church in Stratford, and we wound up meeting in homes a lot because we were so small.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the other elders left. It was Ronnie and another guy, and he left, and that's when Ronnie approached me about being an elder, and I just wasn't I just wasn't real sure.
But it didn't happen right away.
No, it was, but it wasn't too long after.
No,
that.
it wasn't too long.
And anyway, I prayed about it, and eventually felt like, okay, yeah, I think maybe so. And then that was more confirmed as I kind of went on into ministry, started preaching more, and I mean, the preaching journey it's been really good. I think it's become, probably when I first started, it was more of a teaching style, like what I'm used to doing on a daily basis, and stuck real close to my notes and wanted to make sure and get the content and all that. And probably as I've gotten more experience and God has led me more, the style has maybe changed some, where it's more of a preaching. Well, I mean, we say that preaching and teaching, it's all needed and it's all necessary, but there's a little more probably exhortation.
Yeah.
And I think that's come by pastoring people. When you're dealing with people on a daily basis, and you know what they're struggling with, you know there's sins, then you know there's people trying to infiltrate, you get a little more passionate and a little more fired up from the pulpit, because you're really wanting to get these points across. And most of the time, I really hope that's coming out of just compassion for them, and a desire for them to really get a hold of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so that's been kind of a journey, and learned a lot from Ronnie through those times in pastoring and how to deal with people. One of our other elders named Randy Tyler, learned a lot from him. He's one of the best biblical counselors I've ever known. And I talk to him when I'm counseling people. I'll call him and be like, hey, what do you think? And he'll help me with that, and just really good at that. And so that's been a blessing. And man, dealt with some crazy stuff in ministry, from learning how to do church discipline to learning how to deal with just people that are on all sorts of levels. Our church is growing a lot, and the bigger it gets, the more multiple levels of spiritual maturity you get.
Yeah.
And that becomes a lot more of a challenge in preaching and in just dealing with people. And so,
talking about counseling and stuff, I personally, I like the Bob Newhart system.
Most of the time, that's where I'm going.
Just stop it. Just stop it. If you haven't seen that, Google it. Just Google Bob Newhart "Stop It" counseling, and I think for a lot of times, I mean, that's sometimes about how simple it should be, but it's Sovereign Grace. When I was there, okay, so I'm not ignorant to the fact that I don't look like the most inviting person with this face. I mean, even like when you would preach, my friends would preach, and I would sit like in the middle. They hated it. I mean, now you've told me this. You hated when you because it looks like I'm sitting there going like I'm like questioning everything you're saying. So, and it's really not. It's just these wrinkles right here makes me look angry all the time.
I knew he was going to bring up the wrinkle.
Man, I can't help it. And it's the more I do it, the more it stays there. But this was kind of the joke, but it was kind of real too. So like Randy does a great job of counseling. Justin does. Paul does. Now I personally think I do, but I think people are afraid of me. That's not a good thing for a pastor, is it?
Well, so we had kind of levels of counseling, and
This
Ronnie,
might be a good way to put it.
we called him the bullpen guy.
Yeah.
So basically, whenever they wouldn't listen to any kind of logical, calm, tender advice, we'd give them to Ronnie, and he would tell them very bluntly what was going on. That's usually kind of where the stop it came in. But the reality is it was needed, and since he's left, we've kind of had to step it up in that area. There's times when you can really be gentle and coddle somebody, and there's times when they just need the cold hard.
But okay,
truth.
now I get an unfair what's the word I'm looking for?
Reputation?
Reputation here, because then you can testify to this. I don't know how this happens, but I can say I think it's just really a gift of the Lord. I have said some pretty straightforward things with people through the years that nobody really knows like how I kind of got away with it.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's
and
needed. It really is
but I
needed.
but I just I'm not a guy that's all about the fluff and not a big hey let's
But
do a
at
group
the
hug type thing.
on the other hand of that, he can and he has many times been extremely gentle with people too.
Y'all listening out there? I have, but the thing
And I'm
is,
one of them. And there's correction can come, and but he was the guy that would he just had less patience for nonsense, and sometimes I think that we just let too much nonsense go on.
well,
And so,
I think some of it, I really think some of it was my firstborn background. There was no shortage of controversies,
hmm,
and where I was at, the church I was in, it was known for we would just sweep things under the rug. And I learned early on that if you do that temporarily, you think everything's okay, but all that's really going to happen is you push it down the road 6 months to a year, but it's going to blow up. And it wasn't like I think people think I like this stuff. I really don't. I don't like confrontation and controversy and conflict no more than anybody else. I just wish Christians would be Christians and we wouldn't have to do this stuff.
yeah,
But when it comes, you need to address it, and you need. I actually did a video about this, but you need to address it, and you need to do it.
quickly.
When I say quickly, a lot of times I'm just praying that this would work out, and a lot
Hmm.
of times it does, and I thank the Lord for that. But when it's going on, you have to just deal with it. Now, I also say this: you don't have to be upset. You need to deal with things as a Christian would. And the thing is, I think the reason a lot of times that people, we kind of joke like, how'd you get away with that? Was saying that. I think the thing is, and yeah, I'm a little rough around the edges, and I will acknowledge that. I don't mean to be, but that's just kind of my nature and personality, I guess. But I think they know that I genuinely care about them.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm just saying blunt things and straightforward just for the sake of doing it. I've never been a guy that's like just trying to shock value type thing. I
Well, and
mean,
that's advice, and I think it was Paul Washer that I actually heard say that if your knees aren't bleeding for somebody, don't go rebuke them.
yeah,
And then what he meant was praying for them, and I think that's a key for pastors. And this is something that I've learned. If you don't have a compassion to see this improved or restored or whatever, then you're probably not the guy to go correct them. And this is where there is a benefit for a plurality of elders, because there's times when somebody may have done something, and there's different ones of us that are just angry over it. And
you talking about amongst the elders?
yeah,
Oh
so
yeah, we've
so there's
seen
three or
that.
four elders, and somebody does something and maybe mistreats his wife, and we find out about it, and we have to address it or something. And there's times when I've been extremely compassionate. And it's like, okay, I'll just go visit with him, and then there's other times when I'll be just so angry, and I don't know why that happens. But then if that's the case, then somebody else can go talk to him, and it it works out much better.
Right.
And that's where guys that are in the pastoral ministry by themselves, I really feel for them, because those things are hard to deal with every time. You don't have any help. You don't even really have anybody you can talk to about it, and it's a tough thing. So you guys that are out there that are doing that, we feel for you.
Well, I know some guys. There's a handful of guys that do a good job of it, but for the most part, they have pretty mature churches,
Mm-hmm.
and then that goes a long ways. Things like that. But like we dealt with a situation one time, probably one of the most difficult ones we dealt with, And we were dealing with a guy, and he showed up at the meeting we were going to have with him, and he had a list of complaints against all of us. Now, I'm an easy target, and so this dude right
Most
off
of the
the bat,
complaints were against Ronnie.
yeah, yeah. So this dude right off the bat, he's just like, we said, okay, well, what complaints do you have against the elders? And so, I mean, I can think he fired off like four things, and like one of them he said, and whatever he said, I thought about it, and I just said, well, you may be right. I think he accused me of gossiping about him or something. And when he said what he did, I mean, I just told him, I said, yeah, you may be right there. Now my reason for what I did was the person I was talking to knew about the entire situation from him. I mean, so, and I'm,
Yeah.
And I knew the guy I was talking to very well. He's related to me, and he just asked me how I was going. So, but I told him this. I said, you weren't there, so yeah, that could be considered gossip. So I said, what do you got next? And one of our good friends, Paul Wilson, I think he was ready to put a beat down on him. I mean, he was getting fired up, and he's told me a number of times. He says, man, I could not believe how calm you were in that situation and how you handled it. I said, look, man, when when somebody's accusing you of something, most of the time there's some truth to it. And if there is, don't get up in pride and act like you're innocent. Just if there's some truth, just own it. Because here's the
Well,
thing: even in the worst situations, we're still striving for reconciliation and unity.
right.
And if I'm saying, hey, I think you've done this, and this guy's saying, well, you've done this, okay, if I've done it, yeah. Now, one thing he didn't do, he never admitted anything. We ended up having to put him out of the church, but
Yeah, it
but
was another big lesson learned, and
yeah,
but that was another time when, I mean, obviously ministry experience, you can't buy experience, and you can't learn it from a book. You can't even learn it from somebody personally discipling you. The only way there's some things, the only way you're going to learn them is to experience them. I
yeah,
had read about church discipline, and I had talked to people that had been through it, but until you just can't know how it's going to feel until you're there, and
yeah.
it's no fun. I'll just let y'all know.
I remember, when seemed like we kind of there was like a revival, resurgent, amongst some more conservative type churches, along the doctrines of grace flavor, and the church discipline was one of those things. Like we practice that, man. Everybody's all about it. It all sounds great until you have to do it. And I'm going to tell you something. Even in the most obvious cases, it's a gut punch. I mean, you don't want to. You just don't want to go there, and that's
Right.
why a lot of churches don't. But I remember coming over here to Bowlegs, and I taught on church discipline one Wednesday night, and one of the brothers, he raised his hand and he goes, well, I don't see what the problem would be. And I said, wait till it happens. I said, you'll see, because like in our church, we've got like three families that, there's more than three families, but there's three families that make up a large percentage of the church. Well, if one of those falls under church discipline, man, I'm going to tell you, it's going to cause problems. And as a pastor, as elders, you don't get to not get to deal with it because it's going to cause problems.
Right.
And so it's not easy. It's like, if for everybody out there that thinks being a pastor is just preaching on Sundays and golfing the rest of the time, it's not that way. I mean, I worked full time. I wasn't even bivocational most of my ministry. It's Sovereign. Two of us received a little bit. We would have been like probably the worst paid youth pastors in town.
Yeah.
That's about what we made. I mean, I was thankful for it, and to be honest, the job I had, I loved. It just didn't want to pay very good, but um, and so I was bivocational there. Then when I came here, I was bivocational the first year, but we were moving to go full time, and I've been full time ever since. But the thing of it is, even being full time, it's not anything like what I thought. Like on your time, um, I mean, you're constantly. It never leaves your mind. Don't matter what you're doing. So
Yeah.
just the minute the stuff that you're whether it's sermon preparation or somebody's sick. I mean, we've had some of our members pass away. There's always something that
Well,
you're
in the
dealing with.
administration of a lot of things, even though some churches have more help in that than others, but there's always constant. We need Sunday school teachers. We need nursery workers. We need, people to mow the lawn and all of that. And that's really the role of the deacons, but you're still thinking about it all the time.
Yeah, there's no shortage of things like that, and and so no, it's been a when I look back at when we met, and we've been friends for 23
I moved to Stratford
24 years.
23 years ago. Almost 23 years ago.
So you moved there then. So just, I mean, really probably about that time, and for 20 of that, almost 18 of that, we were together all the time. I mean,
in the same church, and
same church, and then
serving in ministry, and
you and your wife just been the best friends. I mean, and I'm going to say something about that. When I say best friends, I truly mean friend in the truest sense of it. I mean, you guys have always been there, and you probably put up with a lot of junk from me because I'm not. There's no shortage of me venting. He got to listen to me vent and rant about things I was, something going on in the church or something on the way to the prison a lot of times. And there's times I would say, there is no way else to even look at this. And he would just real quietly go, well, have you ever thought about this? I'd be like, son of a gun, I ain't thought about that, So, I mean, he talks about me discipling him, but he was a great listener and he thought, and then at the right time, he would just say this, And
yeah, it's been a real blessing. The friendship, the time together. His kids were still young when I first met him. His oldest was a freshman.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they were not even in high school yet, and so I pretty much watched them grow up, and now he's watched my kids pretty much grow up.
Once your kids born, I mean, yeah, he's an OSU guy, and so we'd keep his firstborn, Grace. They'd come to pick her up, and she's going, "Oh, you."
Yeah. Only when she was little. She is now a student at Oklahoma State. So,
hey, if I would have went to college out of those two, I would have picked OSU. I would have not have picked that liberal social OU. So, and Barry Sanders is my favorite football player of all time. Greatest running back. I don't care what you guys think.
Doubt.
Greatest running back ever. Yeah, man. I feel like I had them kind of moves when I was in school.
It was
providentially the Lord kept me out of football.
You never got to play. We probably would have seen it.
I know.
You couldn't have handled the fame.
I probably not.
I saved you from yourself.
Yeah. I tell my kids, I said, I went 2 full years without getting tackled. They said, you never played? I said, it was in 5th and 6th grade, but nobody could catch me.
Well, you didn't get tackled in high school one time either.
I did not.
Not in a game, anyway.
Yeah. It was just too quick.
Now, his son, I did watch him. His son was a phenomenal running back at Stratford and won state championship.
My son and my son-in-law.
And son-in-law, both of them. It would be really tough to say which one was better. They were both really, really good running backs.
They just ran different, but they were really.
Maybe we should have them race again now.
Well, Tyler was faster than Kyle.
Well, I know, but now Tyler's a lot older than Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle works out more than Tyler does, but nobody is as competitive as Tyler.
That's true. He might pull something.
He ran the greatest last leg in a mile relay I've ever seen when they ran Maysville. Tyler was playing baseball. He wasn't really in track shape. And there was this kind of chubby kid from Maysville named Cooper. His last name was Cooper. And he beat Tyler in the 100 and stuff. I mean, I couldn't believe it. So they get in that mile relay, and this Cooper kid's running his mouth like, yeah, we've already got it in the bag and all this. Well, Tyler is so competitive, and they're both going to run last leg. And so Stratford is right on their tail the entire way. I mean, like we're talking 3 yards behind the whole way. We're keeping right with them. So Cooper has the edge. Man, when Tyler came out of that last turn, you could just see the look on his face. This kid was going to die before he got beat. He passed that dude and won. And he pretty much almost died, but what
He is the type that would run himself to death.
he would, yeah, yeah. Now I think he's gotten older and he's a little more tired. I don't think he's quite there, but
I need to talk to him about that. He would always rag on us because we just didn't. We tell him we don't have time to work out.
Oh, I do.
Like, oh, there's always time.
Oh, I tell him
always
that.
an excuse, and we're like, yeah. So I'm glad to know that his time has come. They got four kids.
Yeah, they got 4 now.
Yeah, and they moved to Tulsa. We were actually, Tyler had become. He was my student in school.
Yep.
And then when him and Kaylee got married, we became really good friends, and they would hang out at the house a lot. And really miss those days too. They moved to Tulsa and don't see them near as often.
That's kind of an interesting thing. Like when our relationship started, I mean, I didn't ever look at it like that, but yeah, I mean, definitely, I was probably discipling you. I mean, I've heard your testimony saying that. You said it on here, and then later in life, we were co-elders together. It was, and I'll say this: we had 4 elders over there at Sovereign. There was Randy, Tyler, and I. And I think I'm about 4 or 5 years older than Randy.
Yeah.
And but we were the older two, and you and Paul were the same age.
We were the junior elders.
How old are you now? 40?
45.
45. So I'm 59. So yeah, that much difference. So you guys were both 40, like whatever, same age, and then Randy and I were older. And even though we were co-equals, like we don't believe in the first amongst equals type thing, but you guys always honored us 2 older guys.
Yeah,
even though you were the guys with the college degrees, y'all both have masters. Paul has a PhD.
No, he doesn't have a PhD.
What? I've been telling people that. What's he got?
He has it's a seminary. His master's is in apologetics in seminary. I don't call him Dr. Paul.
I would never call him that.
It wouldn't surprise me if he winds up with a PhD at some point. He likes school, but the kids have kind of slowed him down on some of that. But no, there's no doubt there was a certain amount of that was honoring, your elders, but there's also an honoring of knowledge and experience. But it's also there's been times when, it's kind of a difficult thing, but you have to correct the guy that discipled you sometimes, and didn't happen very often, but it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, kind of like when he was saying, there's no other way to look at this, and you're bringing a correction. And
well, I remember when we were gonna, before we moved over here, another one of the times me and my wife might have had some intense fellowship over, our thoughts on coming. And anyway, you and Misty came and did some counseling with us.
Yeah.
Now, later on, I used to tell people me and Justin had never had a crossword. and then one day, over something, matter of fact, I think I was okay. I had asked some pretty pointed questions that you did not like. And you got really mad, but it was funny because I remember telling you, I said, all that stuff you told me to do when you're mad, you didn't do any of it right now. So I told you it wasn't that easy.
Yeah, I remember some of those times, and a lot of that was around COVID.
Yeah.
And looking back at some of that time, I was dealing with more in my mind than I realized.
You was doing what now?
I was dealing with more in my mind. I think there was fear, the uncertainty whenever everything was shutting down, and I wasn't afraid of the disease. That wasn't the part that scared me, but the economy was going nutty. And I remember when oil went to $0 a barrel. And I mean, on the surface, probably nobody realized it, but looking back on it, there was some struggle going on.
Well, I
And then
think
we were having discussions about all of that and how to deal with church and all those things. And so, yeah, I definitely
yeah.
lost my cool a few times and probably shouldn't have. But
No, I mean, here's the thing. Okay, so I remember when you and Randy and Paul agreed that you thought maybe close the church down during this time, and I was not on that page. Now the funny thing was, I wasn't even there. I was over here at Bowlegs. I wasn't the pastor, but
no, you still were one of our
I was still an elder there.
You were,
but I
here
wasn't
though every
yeah.
week and looking like it was probably going to become more
And,
permanent, but we weren't sure.
Yeah, and I was pretty staunch and hardcore on. I said, I'll give you everything but Sunday morning. I said, no, I'm not giving them Sunday morning. And but yeah, I was.
Which, just for the record, we only shut down like a week or two.
Yeah, I know,
and we were back at it, but we did shut down long enough to figure out what is this thing.
But the truth is, I was sitting there, feeling like, am I wrong? I remember coming over here to church that first Sunday because this group over here met out here under this awning, and they just asked me to come to their meeting. And we we wouldn't even come in the building. Just, I don't know, there was a handful of men. There was all the deacons, me, and some other guys. And I remember one of those fellas, he said, he don't even go to church here no more, but he goes, I believe on Sunday morning a man's supposed to be in church with his family. Now, the odd thing was they didn't come a lot. but I didn't know that at the time. And so, I remember Brother Bobby Cross, he looked at me and he goes, well, Ronnie, what do you think? And I said, man, this is you guys' church. I mean, I'm not, I don't really have a say. And they said, no, we want to know what you think. I just told them, I said, I just believe that on the Lord's Day, I believe that God's people should meet. And I said, now, as far as like sickness and stuff, I had the same policy, man. If you know you're sick, don't come, And so I remember though, coming over here that Sunday thinking, am I doing the right thing? Because you seeing everybody closing down. Everybody forgets that John MacArthur closed down at first.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember thinking the first time, I didn't think it would happen, but I remember having the thought of the reality of being arrested or the authorities coming in and shutting it down. There was a real possibility of it during that time, and I just thought, well, I guess if it happens, it happens. Now.
Well, and it did happen in places.
Yeah,
we're in
didn't happen
Oklahoma.
Here.
So we were safer from that.
Yeah, I don't think Bowlegs was a prime target, But I will tell you this: Nathan Cross, he called the Seminole police and the sheriff's department and said, "Hey, just letting you guys know we're having church."
Yeah,
he just told them, not like I dare you, And they said, or he called the city and they said, well, that would be more the county, the sheriff. He called them and he says, "You're good with us," So.
Yeah.
But
anything that happened in Oklahoma was city ordinance, and our church, we actually did have a conversation with, I don't know if he was the mayor or city councilman or what.
Oh yeah, I met that guy.
He was saying, and he's a Christian, and he was asking what we were going to do, and Paul Wilson was the one talking to him. He said, "Well, we're going to go ahead and meet," and he goes, "Well, what if we make a city ordinance?" And Paul said, "Well, we're outside the city limits." And we are just barely outside of city limits. So, that...
yeah.
But those were some rough times. Looking back on it is amazing how confusing that time was when it didn't need to be. There was so much misinformation out there. So
yeah. And I'll say this, even though we kind of got crossways, that's the only time we've ever had anything like that. Here's the thing about it. There was not anything, I don't think on either one of our part, there was never anything like I'll never talk to that guy again.
It's more like having an argument with your brother.
Yeah, I mean, it's
You
just
know, I
like
mean,
this.
which
It's
that's
like we may not see each other sometimes for 6 months. I mean, you're busy. You're over there, not only just with the church, but I mean, you're an ag teacher, and you're one of the busiest guys I know. And we may not, our families may not see each other for, several months at times. But if we go over there, it's just like we just pick up right where it was. And that is something that I think a lot of pastors don't have.
without a
Um,
doubt.
now that don't mean if they're the single pastor they don't have it. Because again, I know guys that have all kinds of pastor friends. But for the pastor out there that doesn't, you feel alone and all that. I did a podcast a while back, one of my first ones on Pastor. You need friends.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a plurality of elders, you need to really stay in communication with each other. And now we have three elders here. Myself is one of them, and we got Rodney Troglin and Nathan Cross, and it has gone so
It's
incredibly
a
well.
blessing. Yeah, it really is, and things go smoother. But okay, so I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Of the 59 people that watch,
No, it's not 15. Oh, that was on Brady's.
oh,
59.
so the best you've done is 59.
No. I had one that did like 243.
243 views.
Yeah.
Okay, so do they really stay with us for an hour and 30 minutes?
Well,
Or
okay.
do we need to be I mean, how long
No,
do you
we're
usually make these
we're
things?
fixing to wind it down. But here's the thing.
Because we could sit here and talk about
Okay,
this
so
stuff all day.
people don't know my high tech setup, but we're looking at the iPad, but what y'all can't see is this right here.
Very
I'm recording it. This is
fancy.
my high tech equipment, and this will go on Spotify, and Spotify sends it to like Apple and something else out
Man,
there.
we really are.
Oh yeah, I mean we're so big time, it's unreal. And I mean, I didn't even know I could turn my camera sideways, and we're both in there. So, I mean, things are just getting better. Listen, if anybody out there has some equipment that would really, spice this up, I want to get a cool intro song, but I don't know how to do that either. I mean, not only am I uneducated and untrained, I am the most dysfunctional technological guy you will ever meet in your life. So I'm really at a disadvantage. But I just thought I don't care. I'm gonna do this podcast. If it helps one pastor out there, man, praise the Lord. But what was we going with that?
I was just wondering if we need to wrap this up.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap it up because another thing is
That's something else I've been.
We're gonna
kinda
go
good
eat here in a
with
second.
him,
Yeah, we're doing this. It's almost 7:30. We're gonna go eat really good here in a second.
Absolutely.
But no, and so here's the thing. I've got a good friend, Harold Smith, that does the Backwoods Baptist podcast, and if you've never seen it, I mean, it's good just to watch it. But he has the absolute best intro of any podcast out there. I promise you, it's worth it. He even will joke about that. He'll say people only they just turn it on just to hear the intro. Have you ever heard it?
I'm sure I have.
Oh, dude, we'll play it here in a minute. It's the best. But so me and Harold started doing this on his podcast, and we would just joke about how that we do this and it's just unscripted. And so I was kind of calling this that, but he started calling his that too. So I'm not going to steal that from Harold. So what we've got today is we just call it Unrehearsed. Everything you've heard, it's just off the fly, man. It's just off the cuff. He asked me, what are we going to talk about? I said, well, we're just going to kind of break into it. And who knows? I didn't have any idea we'd talk that much about the prison.
I didn't either. I mean, I hadn't really thought about the prison.
Yeah, so that's just kind of the way it goes. And but it lets people know more about you, and they can find out that you're uneducated and untrained too.
But I don't use double negatives.
No, him and Paul
what
Wilson.
Ronnie would say is, I don't use no double negatives, and it just drives me nuts.
Doesn't that make more sense to you out there?
No.
I don't use.
Now you mentioned a triple negative. If you use a triple negative, it would actually rotate back around and would still be correct.
Yeah, see, that confuses me. I don't even know what they're. That's why I'm going for a quadruple.
Grammar is important.
And if you're out there and you don't even know what a double negative is, you qualify to be an uneducated and untrained pastor, at least on that. So, so with all that being said, we're going to wrap this up. We've gone about an hour and almost hour and 35 minutes here. All I was going to tell you, though, people will listen to this on Spotify. Like they're driving. They won't do it on YouTube because they can't,
Yeah.
And so they told me that's why I've got my phone down here recording, so I can upload that on Spotify. And people, I've had people say, "Man, I love that right there."
Well, that's good.
Yeah, and so that being said, we're going to be signing off. This has been another episode of the Uneducated and Untrained Pastor. But the key is, are you spending time with Jesus?
Amen.
Until next time, I'm out, Pastor Ronnie.